For Creamer Media's Polity, I am Shannon DeRay-Hove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me to discuss what it means to be radical in South Africa today. Welcome.
Thank you.
What did you hope to achieve in addressing the meaning of being radical in South Africa?
Now, radical is one of these words that is thrown around and claimed and is used, I think, boastfully by people. I think if you're a radical, you don't need to broadcast that to the world. And what I was trying to do is to argue that when we consider radical meaning get to the root of a problem, we need to look at a given set of conditions at a particular point in time and decide what will be the most effective action that one can take, which is thoroughgoing and will have long-term consequences. Now, I pose this in contradistinction to the tendency for people to use fearsome, hair-raising threats to capitalism and to call immediately for a socialist state or a workers' state. Mm-hmm. Now, what I'm arguing is that even if one does believe in socialism, to call for socialism as a basis for uniting people and for organizing people at this particular moment is not addressing the key issues that confront people immediately at this moment. Now, it is true they're in wage labor, which is capitalist labor, but if you look at the main crises of the present, crisis of violence, a crisis of corruption, malgovernance, patronage, a crisis of giving re-Bantustanization with the powers given to chiefs in the same areas as were the previous Bantu authorities. Now, if we look at all of these things, we can't shunt these aside and focus purely on winning over the organized working class. Now, that has been the tendency of much that goes under the label of radical, and it's not new. In fact, the same question arose during the struggle against apartheid, where some people argued that we must concentrate on the workers and that once one had achieved socialism, racial oppression and the various other disabilities would disappear because they were really offshoots of capitalism. Now, other people argued, and I was one of these, that, and that was the position of the ANC and its allies, that South Africa was a state which had a system, apartheid state system, which affected not only workers, but all classes of black people disadvantageously. In the case of black workers, they entered the labor market in a different way from white workers because apartheid forced Africans to carry passes. Mm-hmm. So they entered a labor contract with a measure of insecurity due to the possibility of being kicked out of the urban areas, all of these things. So even at the level of labor was within a framework which was different for white and for black because of apartheid. Mm. So on that basis, we argued that it was important, and this was the way in which apartheid was defeated, insofar as it has been defeated. Some people argue apartheid lives on, but in some ways probably it does. But the defeat which democracy does comprise was possible because one organized people as workers as students, as women, as community leaders, as youth. All of these strata had problems of their own which were not only at the shop floor. Consequently, it is necessary, if that was a radical approach to overthrowing the apartheid, getting rid of the apartheid system. And in the present then, we have to ask ourselves, at this particular moment and in time, what is radical? People are being denied water, health care, housing, kicked out illegally of where they stay. Women are being abused. People who don't pursue heterosexual relations are being murdered or harassed. Now, in my view, we need to join all of these categories of people who suffer under the present Zuma-led ANC and unite them in reclaiming our democratic rights, reclaiming the promise of 1994. That is a radicalism that relates to the present moment, not to some abstract belief system.
Do you see the EFF as pursuing a new radicalism?
See, the EFF has correctly grasped that people are hungry, that they are feeling the effects of inequalities, that they are angry about being denied basic needs, and that the government responsibility for the killing at Marikana has left people very, very angry and upset. So they have been very skillful in projecting themselves as a voice which raises these issues, which are issues of real concern to people. It's done it dramatically. It's done it very aggressively. But the question of whether or not they are a radical force depends on what policies they advance to remedy these problems. If you say the land is theft and that land has been stolen and we're not going to pay anything for it, how exactly are you going to get that land on that basis? One of the reasons I think it would be, well, let me say, one has to ask oneself also, what are the types of land ownership? How have they been allocated? What are they doing now to address it? And this generalized condemnation of the land distribution as theft is not taking account of the way they are trying to distribute land now around the Platinum Belt, amongst others, through giving land claims to chiefs to administer. So they're not actually addressing the intricacies of what has happened not only before 1994, but in the years since then. So with regard to land, with regard to the mines, by the way, are already owned by the state. They're not, it's not a question of nationalizing, it's a question of deciding on the allocation of licenses and taxation laws and a range of these things. Now you hear no discussion of this from the EFF, and I think what is important is that if we ask for a fundamental transformation that benefits the poorest of the poor, we need to see what is the plan that is being advanced, whether by the EFF or by NUMSA or any other group of people, and only one that is related to concrete realities can claim the name radical.
Thank you for your insight. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking about radical politics in South Africa.